crap. Well, howdy folks. I'd like to welcome you again to another episode of What's in Tegan's Storage Locker, the show that dares to ask the question, just what is in my storage locker? The answer now, as it's pretty much going to be every time, is comic books. I bring a pile of comic books out of one of my boxes of disorganized stock, shall we say. And we're going to go through them, and we're just going to look at them and put some bags on it, maybe do some organizing, a little bit of organizing. Let's not get too carried away here. And that'll be that. We'll, do it for about an hour and call it a day. How does that sound? And at some point, the cat will probably interrupt me. So, I've done what I could to try and exhaust him running around the apartment with the little jingly toy, but there's never really enough for him in terms of his exhaustion. It just can't be done. Anyway, speaking of exhausted, let's look at our pile of comics here. I'm sure we'll get through at least 5 of these. All right, first up we have Marvel Age number 113. Cover feature, and this was the joke about being exhausted because this is from 1992 and it's got the Punisher on it. And man, he was beginning to get a bit along on the tooth by then. He had, I think, 3 books by now. I think Warzone had premiered by then. But this book, this was a prestige format limited series with Captain America by Klaus Janson and Dan Chichester. I'm assuming that's how it's pronounced. I never read it, although in honesty, because it was a prestige format limited series in 1992, and that was, too rich for my blood for, I was only sort of into the Punisher at the time. But now I think, oh, wow, yeah, I want to go back and read Klaus Janson doing these 2 characters for 3 issues. Marvel Age, as odd as it may sound, I was kind of a nerd, so Marvel Age was one of my favorite titles because I loved all the looks behind the scenes to see how the sausage was made, all that good stuff. Let me get this straightened out here. It was always at the top of my pile because I loved reading. It was a puff magazine. There's no doubt that it was intended to sell Marvel comics, but within those parameters, I guess you would say, it could do some interesting things because the one thing, that didn't have anything to do with selling Marvel comics was talking about the people who made them, and they could actually provide some pretty interesting information as far as that was concerned in terms of just like, editors talking about what it was like to work at Marvel and, talking to other freelancers. And I found it endlessly engrossing, shall we say. All right, so this was, started off with actually the masthead for the whole company here. So that's a fascinating look back, if anything else. Magazine was being edited by Steve Saffel, and I think that he had just taken over the editorship at this point because it was about to go through some changes, if I recall correctly. Begins with, he's got an editorial in here. Begins with talking about the big thing of the time, which was the Infinity War. It's still called Infinity Wars here. They wouldn't get around to doing the Infinity Wars for decades, I believe. And the gimmick of the Infinity War, was just that this was the sequel to the Infinity Gauntlet, and long story short, Adam Warlock's evil twin came back, and he decided, because, it was a theme, I guess he decided to just stick with the theme, he was going to sick evil twins on all of Earth's heroes, so most of Earth's mightiest heroes had to fight evil twins who they defeated. For the most part, actually, Mr. Fantastic is one of the handful who did not win that fight, and so he became kind of a saboteur. But, Wolverine, Iron Man, Spider-Man. They defeated all their evil twins, although the evil twin of Spider-Man, he actually stuck around for a while. He was a player in Maximum Carnage. All right, and then here's just what else was going around. You got, they're trying to sell the Ghost Rider and X-Men crossover. And the holograms for the Spider-Man 30th anniversary. All the 4 Spider-Man books had hologram covers, which, you know, as far as those things go, they weren't bad-looking holograms. I know we like to laugh at holograms in hindsight, but there were worse gimmicks they tried. The holograms at least looked a little cool. The Marvel offices were invaded February 7th by MTV VJ. Oh, remember VJs? Karen Bryant filming page 2 for her music video show. That might be an interesting piece of footage to dig up. And here is an interesting little item about Marvel's relatively long partnership with Katsuhiro Otomo. They published, as you might know, because it's rather famous, they published Akira. They were Akira's first American publishers, and they put out a really nice colorized edition of that story, which, you know, I keep expecting to see now that Marvel is working with third-party licensors again. I keep expecting to see a new edition of that because, you know, an omnibus of Marvel's Akira with the original 1990s colors, they would have no trouble selling that. I think, you know, they're getting into, you know, Micronauts and ROM, and they did Conan again for a while. It really, it's the type of thing you can imagine them doing at some point. Akira may be drawing to its spectacular conclusion, but Otomo fans won't be left high and dry. Even before the end of Epic's Akira series, look forward to the one-shot special Farewell to Arms. It takes place in the far-flung future when nuclear and atomic weapons have been eliminated. But as Katsuhiro Otomo proves, the self-destructive human race can find new weapons, new paths to extinction. Farewell to Weapons will be part of a special Dirtbag special promotion campaign along with Sam and Max. Imagine that, a time when Marvel was selling Katsuhiro Otomo alongside Sam and Max. Each comic will be polybagged with dirt, the hot new teen variety magazine, and with an audio cassette featuring the musical masterworks of Morrissey, Ice-T, and Depeche Mode. Stay tuned for more Otomo news coming soon. And speaking of Kodansha, which is maybe not a phrase you're going to find in every Marvel comic, everyone here at Marvel and Epic would like to welcome Sam Yoshiba from Kodansha, the folks who first brought us Akira for 6 months. Sam is on loan from the esteemed Japanese comics publisher and will be hanging out in the X-office of Bob Harris and Suzanne Gaffney to learn the American way of producing superheroic comics. Now, the burning question around the office is which Marvel staffer will be sent off to Japan. I wonder, not remembering off the top of my head, if they ever actually did that. They're premiering the Silver Sable book, which I think I bought the first half year of because I liked the character, but I don't think the book, I don't think I stuck around with the book for very long. And oh, hello, and I was just telling the wonderful people at home that we were going to have some Roger at some point. Oh, you. All right. Anyway, this was the System Bites, which was the 1992 Punisher, Daredevil, Wonder Man, and Guardians of the Galaxy annuals. And man, you want to talk about a bunch of characters who had absolutely nothing to do with each other than Punisher and Daredevil, yes, but oh, hello. Ah! Oh, goodness. And now that, you know, I don't want him here, he's going to go and try to beat up his brother. Just watch, sure Sure as the swallows return to Capistrano. There's a California reference for you. Although the way the world is going, who knows if the swallows even return. Oh, little man, you just want to be in the way. You just want to be in the way. We're talking about Marvel from 30 years ago. And, you know, the Punisher and Daredevil, yeah, but Wonder Man actually was a supporting player in Guardians of the Galaxy, but trying to think of a story that all four heroes could participate in equally. Man, you're just not going to give up, are you? That seems to me like a fun, creative exercise, even if in hindsight it maybe looks a little bit, you know, a little bit like a grab bag. They were on a little bit firmer footing here with the other one, Assault on Armor City. That had, geez, you're just not giving up, are you? All right, well, we'll just sit here with you for a while. Darkhawk, Avengers, and Iron Man. I remember that this was actually kind of interesting for Darkhawk fans because it started, you know, Darkhawk fans, huge constituency in 2023. Started off with Iron Man, I think, going to harass Darkhawk because, of course, you know, if someone's wearing an armor, they must have stolen his technology. This is interesting. The Job. Now, I didn't buy this, but this was one of Marvel's periodic attempts to make a comic book that didn't have superheroes in it. So it's a cop book. And if you think about it, I mean, the fact that they can't just, you know, say what you will about cop dramas, but they're popular in just about every other medium except for comics. Marvel tried over the years, but it never stuck. Even, I think this was, I want to say after NYPD Blue, possibly, co-written by Larry Hama and Joe Jusko, who, brother of a police officer, so there was a family connection there. Penciler Mike Harrison. Oh, this was an early Jimmy Palmiotti gig. Later on, after 9/11, they made another big push with some, I guess, first responder comics. They had a cop one and a firefighter one. I think they were just called The Call, I want to say, as opposed to The Job. I'm not remembering off the top of my head. Anyway, they've never been able to make a go of this, even with all the will in the world. And I don't really think they're going to be making another attempt at a cop book anytime soon. Stan Lee, he had a page of Stan's Soapbox in every issue of Marvel Age. And of course, you know, whether or not Stan actually ever saw any of this prose is, you know, your guess is as good as mine. One thing he did do here is they would, and this was actually kind of fun, they published these, with the Soapbox, they published these old Willie Lumpkin strips from back in, God, I don't remember, the early 60s when they tried to make a go of, because Stan was, I mean, he hated working in comics. He was always trying to break out to another field. And, you know, back then, newspaper comic strips, that was the ne plus ultra of where you could go if you were a cartoonist in terms of actually making money and actually having you know, an audience, get published in a newspaper and get a little bit more respect as well. So, you know, this was one of his attempts with Dan DiCarlo, of all people, with the character who is more famous as the Fantastic Four's male person. And of course, here's that interview with Klaus Janson. You know, this might be actually interesting to pluck out. I'm not going to sit here and read the whole thing to you. But, you know, Klaus Janson has, I mean, you know, sort of goes without saying, he's one of the most famous inkers, and, you know, not without talent as a penciler, although I've always thought his actual art, his figures always looked a bit stocky, and You know, look at that forearm. Like, well, what even is going on with that forearm there? I say that with all the love and affection in the world to Mr. Jansen. I was just mentioning Gothic, the one he did with Grant Morrison. I think that was 1990, just a couple years before that. You're just deciding to spread out here, aren't you? Oh. See, it was fine when you were just sitting there. Oh. See what I have to put up with here? It's not so bad when I just have to record the little, 2-minute videos. But this, if I didn't basically record through the carnage, we'd be lost. Page of Hembeck. Oh my goodness, you don't give up. The people at home are here to see the comic books. They're not here to see me fight with my cat. They're just not. And you don't want to just, oh goodness. I record a podcast. I think there's an ad for it at the end of the show. And sometimes you can hear me screaming at him in the background of that podcast. So, Hembeck, he used to have 2 pages in the book. He had the whole center spread. This is after he'd been demoted to only a page. And, of course, Captain America and the Punisher getting together and watching their respective movies. So Howard Duck shows up to... and this was actually the best part of the book every month, is you had 2 pages by Mr. Mark Grunwald, Mark's Remarks. I want to say those are still online. Someone uploaded a number of those online. In a perfect world, there'd be a fat collection of these on the shelf because these were actually interesting, substantive. He got started in fandom, in fanzines. He published one of the most famous fanzines of them all, Omniverse, which itself needs to be compiled at some point. Just watch. It has been, and I missed it. But, he actually spent some time writing about, serious, quote-unquote, fandom matters. This one's about team-ups. Launching a second decade of epic comics. And they didn't make it a few years from this. There's a Dave McKean Hellraiser cover. I saw something interesting on social media recently, another digression. Dave McKean and Neil Gaiman, at the height of the Sandman, they did one story for Marvel's Hellraiser, and apparently Marvel hated it, and they only published it in the very last issue of the series, at the very end of the Hellraiser run. And it is a very good series, very spooky. There are a couple, it's only like a short story, and yet I remember it very vividly because it's actually quite disgusting, as any Hellraiser story should be, really memorable. But Marvel apparently hated it. They published a fair amount of Hellraiser books. Alien Legion, Tech War, and, of course, Sam and Max. They published a fair amount of Sam and Max books. Of course, they had also been printed by Fish Wrap, which may have been a company that existed just to publish Sam and Max. Comico. There's that mention of that Dirt magazine again, which I've not seen a copy of, I don't think. Sam and Max, they still have a following. Steve Purcell, he never gave up hope because one of the things is they had a connection to Lucasfilm, LucasArts, because Steve Purcell worked there, and I want to say they did a Sam and Max game. So, that ensures their immortality because, the people who remember Monkey Island will never give up the LucasArts flame. Marvel UK. This would have been right at the beginning of the big Marvel UK initiative because, they're talking about Pendragon, which was one of the Knights of the Pendragon was one of the earliest Marvel UK books. And here's a bunch of the, Mystech, Digitech, I've just started to pick some of these, but I didn't buy many of these. I think I bought Death's Head 2 when it came out, and I didn't really know what to make of them. And I've just been picking some of the Marvel UK books out of the discount bins lately, and they're all rather interesting because they had very good art on them. But, you know, the American audience just didn't know what to make of them. And after a while, it became kind of transparent that they were just sort of filling the shelves with stuff to compete with Image. So a lot of the stuff got, regardless of the quality, whatever the quality of the books might have been, they may have been dismissed because of just that factor. Dan Chichester, again, I may not be pronouncing that correctly. He had a big push from Marvel around this time. He did Daredevil for a while. In fact, he's doing a new Daredevil series. I saw the something about him doing writing a new series with the armored Daredevil from the 90s. I want to say he created or co-created Terror, who does not show up very often, but is an interesting character with actually an odd little Hellraiser connection. There's a Le Marchand box in the first issue of his series. Oh, but this book, the Terror book, the most interesting thing about it, and the reason to check it out if you ever run across a copy of it, is because it had art by Jorge Zafino. I think that's pronouncing that correctly, Zafino, who was an absolutely visionary talent who died just absurdly early, way too soon. But he left an impact with just his early career. And you can still see him certainly in the early work of people like, you know, I'm blanking on the name, but I just, you know, I'm just completely blanking on the name of who I was going to talk about. I'm putting the name on the screen right now. There's a Klaus Janson influence there as well. Oh, the 1992 X-Men figures. Now, of course, I don't remember I don't remember the guy who I was trying to remember. But I remember these X-Men and X-Force figures like they were yesterday. Because I was a member of Wham, which I believe has come up in the past. And one of the cooler mailings that Wham agents got was that they sent out a big Xerox and stapled pile of paper that was the tear sheets for the X-Men figures in the production. And they were very fascinating. Obviously, they were just, you know, trying to sell the toys, but it was just, you know, always loved, you know, how the sausage was made, which I guess explains why I also liked Marvel Age, because this was a book all about how the sausage was made. Trying to remember here, Marvel Comics Collector's Classics. This was a later column. I think this was basically just going over team-ups, and then, there's a little bit of excerpt of Overstreet telling you how much all these various books they're talking about cost. I think it was just kind of a reader's guide, like, you know, look through the back issue bins. Here's some interesting highlights. Oh, they had a different name for the letters page every month. That was fun. CBG Fan Awards. They always ran those ballots, which was nice of them. Photographed by Elliot R. Brown, of whoever this poor soul is, who lives forever as Wolverine in our hearts. And Marvel Age Readers Poll. Coming Attractions Checklist. All right. And the calendar for May. So you can find out all about your favorite Marvel birthdays. All right, now this, you, my friend, you get a bag. You can tell this is a little bit well-loved. There's some yellowing on the side here. You know, for my, sorry, it's not mint condition for all you Marvel Age collectors out there. All right, Marvel Age 115. talking about the Rise of the Midnight Suns promotion here. This is kind of a funky cover. They actually did photo covers every now and again with creators on them. Well, why do I have a memory of buying this at the grocery store? I remember buying this at the grocery store. Maybe I have a letter in it or something. So Steve Saffel, again, pushing more Hellraiser books. They must have been making a good brisk business in Hellraiser, because they published a Hellraiser Summer Special, and Holiday Special. Later this year, the Holiday Special will come out. To celebrate Spider-Man's 30th anniversary, Marvel will be releasing a special anniversary poster of the Web Slinger by Ken Stacy. That's a nice piece of work. I wouldn't mind having that. They put out some really nice posters, a lot of which are lost to history since they don't really reprint stuff like that. Here's another Sam & Max ad. Sam & Max Color Collection, 64-page bookshelf comic. That might be fun to go back and pick those up. I didn't buy those at the time. But now, like I say, people still remember Sam & Max. And I just realized that the font there is the old EC Mad, the comic size Mad. It's that M and A right there. A little blurb for the Citizen Kang annuals, which was maybe not the best annual story. It was one of the early attempts to sort of tie all the Kang stuff together, and premiered this series called, I think this was the Anachronauts, was it? And you know they were good because not even Busiek wanted to use them in Avengers Forever. Oh, Kid and Play visiting the Marvel offices. Friday the 13th may be a scary day for some people, but for all the folks in the Marvel editorial offices, Friday, March 13th was a frighteningly thrilling day, thanks to an exciting visit by Kid, co-star of the movies House Party 2, and currently featured in Marvel's own Kid and Play comic book. They had a comic for a while, that's right. I didn't buy it because I didn't really know or care who Kid and Play were at the time. So weren't they in a movie? Digitech. Andy Lanning, early Andy Lanning work. Who was doing this art? That's interesting, painted art. You're not going to tell us? Oh, yeah, the other unique aspect to Digitech is its stunning painted artwork. The man responsible for this is the young Irish artist Dermot Power, who's worked for other comic publishers but never outside the UK. So, all my peeps who know tons about 2000 AD and the like probably know who he is, but not a name I'm familiar with. Although I'm sure he did something that I know. Another Stan soapbox. Oh, without a Willie Lumpkin strip. Boo. Oh, here's Midnight Suns promo with Bobby Chase. There you go. The insidious mastermind behind the rise of the Midnight Suns. She used to have editorials in various books. I remember quite liking her editorials. She seemed like a reasonable person. You know, I was on board. I liked Ghost Rider enough that I was on board with the spin-offs for at least a little bit. Some of them were better than others. The Darkhold book was by far and away the best book of that launch. It was unique. It was interesting. It had Marvel's first out lesbian character. I want to say their first. And of course, it completely crashed and burned. The book was, within a year, the book had been completely changed. The original creators were gone, I want to say. Or at least the penciler was. And there was Morbius, although the Morbius book, it had a little following because it had Ron Wagner doing interesting work, which I wasn't into the book at the time, so I wasn't paying that much attention to it. I'll be honest with you, it's a blind spot of mine because I cannot stand Morbius. That little piggy nose of his, I just want to like slap the dude. Cannot deal with it. Cannot deal with it. Toy Fair, not the Wizard magazine, but the Wizard magazine was named after the event, which they might still do, New York Toy Fair, which was basically where all the big toy convention, where all the companies got together and sold their wares. So, you know, Wolverine Bank, X-Men fake tattoos, I don't know if you can see this picture here, they have all sorts of Marvel merchandise being sold at the time. Mr. Terry Stewart, president of Marvel. Oh, there's Bobby Chase again. She was getting around at the time, I see. And there's that fellow who's dressed as Wolverine also getting around. Hot Sheet. They're talking about more... Oh, I guess they're talking to retailers here. We'll take a look at several upcoming comic books that editors and retail advisors have singled out. Now, of course, this was, I want to say this was 92. Yeah, this was 92. So you know, they're all doing what they can to not talk about the elephant in the room, which is the fact that this is what Marvel has to go up against Spawn and Youngblood. Ghost Rider spin-offs. You know, this was going into the 30th anniversary years for the Avengers and X-Men. Jackson Geiss's work in the Deathlock Annual. Did he even do the whole annual? I want to say he didn't do the whole annual. That's a nice piece of Jan Gersima Spider-Man art from the 1992 Marvel Illustrated Sports swimsuit book. I don't even know if I still have those. I bought them all at the time. I can't remember if I still have them. They could do a new collected edition of that, and I'd probably bring it home. Here's Tech World. Can't go wrong with the Tech War. The kids gotta know, Edna. There's a reference no one under 35 will get. Mark's Remarks, talking about Marvel horror stuff. There's one of Mike Mignola's X-Men pieces for his covers for X-Men Classics. Oh, The Boss Man by Rick Parker. Oh, goodness, I remember this one. Mark Grunewald is looking at the swimsuit, the cheesecake shots, and then Tom DeFalco leaps over him to see them because, of course, you know, time to make fun of the boss for being a horn dog, which I guess was just a thing you did in Marvel. Marvel Series 3 trading cards, which were actually a nice, of their trading cards, I want to say this set had some really nice pieces in it. I was totally on board for the Marvel trading cards. And then they sort of diluted it, and they stopped doing. They stopped putting as much work with the fourth series. I loved everything. I loved the first three, and then I thought those were great. I had a great time collecting them. And then with the fourth series, they got rid of all the info on the back, and I liked all the info on the back. And once they got rid of that, I was just like, I wasn't too excited about it anymore. You know, I still have those in the storage locker as well. Maybe I'll pull those out someday. Writer Chris Cooper talking about his Darkhold book. This is from earlier in the issue. Oh, and here's a Clive Barker Clive Barker actually had a fair amount of stuff in Marvel Age. He did. They had a cover interview with him once, and he was just really involved with Marvel. He had his own line, the Barkerverse, which was early comics work by the Wachowskis, early comics work by Steve Skroce as well. Although the series themselves aren't that well remembered. The one notable book was one called Saint Sinner, which Barker ended up reusing for another book that had nothing to do with the Marvel version of it. There's some Clive Barker trivia you probably didn't need. Hembeck Page. Oh, Hellcat and Patsy Walker. Just at one of the earlier videos, we had the issue where Patsy Walker comes back from hell. There's the Wham Jam, which is the Agents of Marvel, or the Wild Agents of Marvel letters. And, oh yes, I believe that I did have a letter published here under an old name and an old address. So I'll put my finger over that. Wanting one of my many failed attempts to get a no prize. I never actually succeeded in getting a no prize, even though I must have written half a dozen letters over the years. Oh, there's someone dressed up as Professor X from the control booth at the Marvel Comics Toy Fair party. Checklist. Yeah, this was '92, so they were already. Their line was already kind of bloated from the trying to keep pace with the boom years, as it were. So they didn't quite have as many people to publish, many people good enough to publish as they would have liked, because some of the lines started to get kind of rough. All right, what's next in the pile? Oh, here we go. This is a pretty interesting one. X-Men 273. From the last year of Chris Claremont's run on the X-Men. This is an interesting issue because for some reason they just decided that this was going to be Old Home Week. I guess because Jim Lee this might have been around the time of the X-Men trading card set where he needed time to work on that, because they brought in a bunch of ringers to help put the issue together, and it was all people who'd had runs on X-Men in the past. Ski or Die, I guess that was a spin-off of Skate or Die. First page by Whilce Portacio. Yeah, because it starts off with Whilce Portacio, who was doing X Factor at the time, Klaus Janson, John Byrne, Rick Leonardi, Mark Silvestri, Michael Golden, Larry Stroman, Jim Lee. So it was all people who'd either had runs on X-Men or who were currently at the time working on X-Men books, with the notable exception of Rob Liefeld's nowhere to be seen. But Cable's right there. And this was right after the Extinction Agenda crossover, which I loved. It was a great crossover. The first time the X-Men got to meet Cable and his New Mutants. So, you know, he doesn't at this time know that he is his father, because I don't believe that he has yet sent his son into the future. Starring X-Men, X-Factor, and the New Mutants. Because, you know, Claremont always felt free to pull any of the other characters from the mutant books into his books. This looks like, yes, this is Klaus Janson. Who's inking? It's not Klaus Janson inking himself. Oh, Scott Williams inking the whole deal. So there's rare Sight of Klaus Janson, inked by Scott Williams. John Byrne, inked by Scott Williams. That's actually a nice looking page right there. This is just them going over what's happened recently. Like, oh yeah, that Magneto guy who was hanging around, he's back to like fighting the Avengers again. So, like, maybe we got a problem. Oh, I want to say, did I read a blog post a while ago about early JRPGs that were translated into the United States, and how this Destiny of the Emperor was a very, very early attempt to try and import that market over. Apparently a real wonky game, if I remember what I'm reading correctly. Oh, the Silver Surfer game. This one I had. This one I loved. I actually beat this, which is not a given with me, because I own tons of games that I never beat because I wasn't that good at video games, just straight up. Never been that good at video games. But this was the Surfer, so of course I was going to beat this one. But now apparently this game has a reputation for being difficult to beat, so there you go. Now, you know, it didn't make any sense. The reason why it was hard to beat was because he hit the Surfer once and he died, which is kind of the opposite of the Surfer's deal. He's like notoriously invulnerable, like to the degree that he can like fly through a sun and everything, but I guess they couldn't figure out how to turn that into a video game. And we turn the page and we have Rick Leonardi. This was right before the Muir Island saga, so Moira McTaggart is dressed in skin-tight leathers, which, you know, when House of X came out and they had the big Moira McTaggart reveal, my first thought, now I didn't care for that story. I've not written, I could write a very long essay, and I have not yet written about the Krakoa era in any way. But the first thing that I thought when I read the House of X was, how do you explain the Muir Island saga? How do you explain the Shadow King being inside her head for years in the book without the Shadow King saying, huh, that's kind of funny? Maybe it was explained. Maybe Hickman had an answer for it. I don't know. Silvestri. And here's Gambit saying like, oh, why are we hanging around these squares? Let's blow this pop stand. Storm's like, yeah, actually these squares are kind of my people. And here's Mark Silvestri drawing the Lady Mandarin incarnation of Psylocke, later revealed to be Quanon, although that was a couple years down the road. You know, he drew this version of Psylocke a few times, but the character's more, you know, associated with Jim Lee, of course. And, you know, you got to get Mark Silvestri drawing your book. You're going to get a shower scene. There's Jean Grey in the shower for you. And that's Michael Golden, if ever there was one. If ever there was a Michael Golden page, that's a Michael Golden page. Oh, absolutely gorgeous. And magenta, of course. If you're gonna have Michael Golden, you're gonna have magenta coloring. Oh, there's Gambit kicking Wolverine's butt. Yeah, that looks like Mr. Jim Lee, if ever there was. Yep. There's the aforementioned Shadow King. I have to admit, never really cared that much for all the stories that deal with telepathy, because I always thought telepathy, the way the X-Men have it at least, is a real just weasel power. Because, you know, if you're a telepath, it's like, oh, well, you can just win every fight. And, you know, X-Men fans, you get into, you know, the battle board fights and stuff. Here's a couple of Strowman pages to clean out the issue. And Leela Cheney shows up and grabs a bunch of X-Men to go into space, and that's where they find Professor X again. But, you know, telepathic powers, they're weasel powers, because, you know, you get to fighting about, like, you know, fan fights about, like, who would win in a fight. And there's always someone who'll say, oh, well, so-and-so, they're a telepath, so they win hands down. It's like, well, you know, Iron Man and Doctor Doom have workarounds for that. And then they say, well, those don't count. It's like, no, they do count unless you just want really boring comic books where Jean Grey goes around winning every fight. And I understand full well that there are people who want to read boring comic books where Jean Grey goes around winning every fight. But I'm not one of them. I would, you know, just as soon have fun comics where, you know, every character gets to shine. That's just me, though. Oh, speak of the devil, here's an issue from that last run of Jim Lee X-Men, Uncanny X-Men, where they go into space. Inked by Scott Williams. This is, you know, and in a lot of ways you can look back and say, like, the wheels were coming off the bus in terms of Chris Claremont. You know, he maybe didn't have full control over the book anymore because Jim Lee was so popular, and by then, you know, plans were already in motion for the adjectiveless. Oh, here's the Ninja Turtles cereal with pizza marshmallows. Yeah, they're fighting Gladiator. Signed Nolan Ryan. I don't know if any of his records still stand. I used to, for a few years I was watching playoff baseball, but I haven't even watched that since I don't have a regular cable anymore. I wouldn't even know how. That was about the extent of my sports. I watched a couple of the majors and golf every year, and usually pick up playoff baseball in fall, but last few years I haven't even done that. Oh, nice stuff. And, you know, half of these panels were swiped to death by, you know, the early image generation. G.I. Joe Nintendo game. I don't remember anything about that. One of their early 900 numbers, early attempts to make money with 900 numbers, what I'm trying to say. Man, say what you will. This was a nice looking comic. Did the best they could with substandard printing. It was as good as any dollar comic got from Marvel at the time, but you could definitely tell that difference when they graduated to the adjective-less book, although, you know, of course, the stories got, oh, there's an interesting sound effect, schluppy. Bullpen bulletins with your stand soapbox. More of these Neil Adams Three Musketeers ads. Although it might have been just someone in the continuity studios, but boy, I mean, you can tell just by looking at it. You get a bag. And what's more, you get a board as well. Because, of course, Jim Lee X-Men gets a board. All right, how are we doing on? Holy moly, we've been through 4 comics. I mean, whiled away almost an hour. How is that even possible? Well, how about Dr. Strange Flight of Bones, number 3 from Marvel Knights. This was a good decade after Jim Lee had his way at Marvel. One of their Doctor Strange series they did after his ongoing died in the mid-90s, I think 95 or 96, it was canceled. He just had a number of limited series over the next few years. And this one had Paul Chadwick on the art. Paul Chadwick did a surprising amount for Marvel. He actually did a run on Deadpool in around 2000, 2001. And his Marvel, you know, he put as much work into his Marvel work as anything he did. Ad for Earth X in 99. Dan Jolly story with story and script. Tony Harris and Ray Snyder. Oh yeah, I want to say Paul Chadwick was doing pencils because was Tony Harris doing art on the first couple issues? I want to say that's a half memory. Oh, Animorphs video. I forgot they even did an Animorphs video. Now there's a series that people still fondly remember. Ad for Avengers Forever. Wasn't I just mentioning Avengers Forever? Marvel Superheroes versus Street Fighter. You want to talk about a game that people still remember fondly? Even I played that a few. Of course, they still had Marvel versus Street Fighter, Marvel versus Capcom cabinets at bars. I was playing that in the 2010s. Not that I hang out at bars very often. But yeah, Paul Chadwick sort of trying to do a Tony Harris. Lunchables ad. Man, like the first few years when they were doing CGI everything for their house ads and whatnot, it just didn't always work. You look at this and you imagine, like, who thought that this didn't hurt the eyes? Who could have thought that? Thunderbolts 25. Black Panther 6, that was the first year, was in the Marvel Knights line. Explosive finale to the Magneto War. Shudder. This was a good. The second arc of the Web Spinners title had Keith Giffen art on it, and it was and finally pulling a thread, a loose thread from the 1960 Silver Surfer series. Believe it or not. Not a bad looking book. It looks like maybe Paul Chadwick might have been brought in at the last minute here, but you know, Paul Chadwick even, is that guy Church of Subgenius, is that? Never really understood what that whole deal was. It's Storm Ammo. Imagine that. Last page revealing a Doctor Strange comic that's Storm Ammo. Who would have thought? Oh, goodness. Strange Occurrences. Pages 10 and 11 of issue 2. Oh, yeah, and that's Tony Harris. And apparently went out without the script on it. ad for Overpower. I think I mentioned I already spent way too much money on Overpower when I was at that age. So, Dr. Strange, Flight of Bones 3, you get a bag. There's got to be something with, isn't that? How about, Superboy 42. Now, this was a series I bought all through the 90s because it was good. And not only that, it got a second wind after sort of petered out for a while with issue 50. They really made a big push to bring back a lot of 70s Kirby feel to it. They had like the Cadmus Project and Commandee homage. It was just a really fun title all through its run, the original 90s Superboy. And this, I want to say, yes, Sal Buscema drawing a DC book, which was something that happened in the late 90s, August 1997. With Ray Crissing on inks, not a name that really rings a bell in terms of... and this was just, looks like he's going up against the Superboy Revenge Squad. I don't know if that's what they called them, but these were just villains from earlier in his run, because he fought King Shark. If I remember that guy named the Scavenger. Did he fight King? He must have fought Killer Frost, and I don't remember it. Oh, and there's, looks like Earth 2. There's the Earth 2 Superman and Robin, I want to say. Oh, Batman and Robin Pop-Tarts. What is this? I don't get it. I would probably have to go back to figure out what was actually happening here, other than that this is it's got, yeah, Sal Buscema. It's never going to go wrong with Sal Buscema. Never penciled an ugly-looking comic book. Try Kool-Aid Mega Mountain Twist and get free Mega Mountain gear. That's a nice double page there. About to get creamed by an airplane. What are you doing over there? More Batman and Robin. Yeah, I don't remember anything happening in the book at this point. It was, like I said, I think this was before it got a little bit of a shot in the arm there. VHS of the Adventures of Batman and Robin, which was the second coming, so to speak, of Batman the Animated Series, because I want to say that's when they messed with the character designs for a number of the villains on it. You get a bag. How are we doing on time here? And we're about time. So, well, man, I really need to make better time with this. That we got through 6 books. Oh well. I think it's those issues of Marvel Age that took up all the time. Okay, well, another episode in the can, so to speak, with me looking at old comic books. So maybe while you're here, give a thought to checking out the other videos on the channel, and go check out Udder Madness. That's my podcast with Claire Napier. We have our own YouTube account where I'm slowly but surely putting up visual annotations of the old episodes of the podcast. And just, I got a lot of stuff. If you like what you see here, check out some of my other stuff. Have a wonderful day.